Thank you all for joining me today. I'm Richard L. Scott, the Black Christian Geek, and this is for my Linux channel. Haven't recorded uh, any of these in a while, and just to give a brief explanation as to where I've been or what I've been doing since being here. One, I retired from public service the end of January of this year, and shortly thereafter I started a new position. Well, what prompted the video today? I had to send my HP laptop, my main workstation, off the HP for warranty repair, and thus while it was sent away, I had to fix up a secondary machine to use, and that's the machine I'm using here now. This is my Lenovo machine, and as you can see, it's running KDE Neon. And Neon is a Linux distribution based on Ubuntu. A couple of things I want to mention as we get going. If you find this beneficial, please subscribe to the channel on YouTube. If you do a search for Black Christian Geek, Linux, and more, you should be able to find the channel if you're watching this on Facebook or some other social media outlet other than YouTube. So, what is Linux? I'm going to give a brief explanation of Linux as well as KDE Neon. Going back here, Linux is just another alternate operating system to Microsoft Windows or to Apple's Mac OS. Linux is what I have been running as of October. Every day is my quote unquote daily driver. The daily system I use every day since October of 2020. I almost made the switch in 2014, but got cold feet at the end and bought another Mac. I used Macs for 20 years up until 3 years ago as my primary operating system, and then fell in love with Linux. Thus, what is KDE? KDE is an organization now that manages the Plasma desktop. That's what this platform is. And KDE originally stood for K Desktop Environment, KDE, but now it's just the organization that manages the open source and free foundation that keeps the Plasma desktop up. That's managed by that group. So again, what prompted this video is why I can't recommend KDE Neon as a distro. Distro, in the simplest term, not to go in too deep, because it's not a geek dive, a deep dive. This is just surface level information. A distribution is a Linux operating system that's packaged with applications, desktop environment, and things to use to help you get your work done. This is just a few of the things that's on here now. You see Firefox, Chrome, things that you would use on your Mac or Windows if you use that system. KDE Neon specifically was designed to demonstrate what the Plasma desktop could offer, and it's very cutting edge. So all of the new features come out pretty much on Neon first. And Neon sits on top of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is another popular distro. And sorry, it would help if you spell it correctly. And I'll go to the desktop. So it's built on top of Ubuntu. I'm getting deeper than I planned to already, but I'll go ahead and explain a couple things briefly while we're here. LTS stands for long term support. Long term support for Ubuntu is released and comes out every 2 years on even years. 16, 18, 20, 22. So the next LTS is always, excuse me, this is year dot month. So it'll be released in 2024 April. 2024 April will be the next LT release. Although it's released every 2 years, it's maintained, excuse me, for 5 years. So 22.04 is the latest LTS release of Ubuntu, and it'll be supported until 2027, April 2027. However, Ubuntu itself is released on a six month cycle. It's released every April and every October. So it's 2023.04. This past April's the latest release, and it's maintained for 9 months. And in 6 months, in 23.09, when we get to, I'm sorry, 23.10, sorry, when we get to October, it will, they'll release the next version of the short term release for lack of better term. Don't get lost in the weeds, Richard. What's the point? Point is, KDE Neon is built on Ubuntu's long-term release cycle. However, because it's so leading edge for what comes out, this is the third or fourth time I've given KDE Neon a try. And although it's a beautiful operating system, it's a beautiful distro, and it looks good on the surface, it's some little things that hang up on it that just makes it a distro that I just cannot recommend for production. Now here's the ironic thing. I'm recording this on the very system that I say couldn't be used for production, but that's also intentional by design. So why wouldn't I recommend it? The short answer to that, again, it could be a lot more elaborate, is several other applications you would just periodically freeze, like this spectacle. I use this for screenshots every day. Say rectangle and whatever, draw around, it'll capture that screenshot, and I'll just say save, and it saves a picture of what I just captured to the desktop. I'm to here. That's what I just captured a picture of, and it saved it. It's working fine now, and I did run an update just before rebooting the system, but earlier it was freezing every time I tried to run it. And sometimes when I start opening multiple windows, things would just periodically freeze. And that has always happened every time I've tried to use KDE Neon, but it generally doesn't happen when I try using other systems. So you say, then, Richard, what do you recommend? Great question. I mentioned before Ubuntu. Ubuntu is very popular. By default, it uses the GNOME desktop. I won't go into details on that right now, but if you wanted to use the Plasma desktop by KDE, but the Ubuntu version of it, that would be Kubuntu. And I do recommend this one. It's, it, it will run largely on the same release cycle as Ubuntu, but the K is for Plasma from the KDE team, thus the originally the KDE desktop, the K desktop environment running on it, or Linux Mint. Linux Mint I used for a long time. I no longer personally use it, but I still recommend it because I think it's just a easy adoption coming from either Mac or Windows. And if you want feedback on perhaps any other Linux desktop, I'll throw this in as a bonus. The one I use is Manjaro on my main system. Of course, the system that's off being repaired at HP right now. But this is an Arch distribution. I would not recommend this for beginners, but I have fallen in love with the Arch family, and Manjaro just seems to be the sweet spot for me. But particularly one of these two is what I recommend. Linux Mint, I installed for one of my brothers and one of my sisters, and they both used it. My sister used hers for about 2 years before she had some issues with her system, got a new computer, and went back to Windows. And my brother is like on year 3, and he's still using his system. In fact, he ran Linux Mint for about the same 2-year period, and when he started having issues, we switched him over to Ubuntu. So if you want any others, direct message me, put some, comment me down below, and I'll be happy to give you some additional feedback. Subscribe to the channel if you found this interesting, useful, or beneficial. Start using Linux, and God bless. Remember, this is Richard L. Scott, the Black Christian Geek. Thank you so much for listening.